I got to tell you about a story of a girl friend of mine who is a mostly lesbian bisexual, and she usually sleeps with women. That's her thing, but she also sometimes sleeps with men. And I was out for dinner with her, and I was mentioning I was going to have this conversation with you. And she said, well, it's really interesting thinking about the way that coming off the pill changed. And she spoke about a lot of the stuff that I'm sure we'll get into to do with the changes in stress and sort of the depth and color of her emotions and things like that. But then she said, one other thing that I noticed when I came off the pill was that for 1 week out of every month, I was straight again.
That's so fascinating. And I guess I can guess which week of the month it was.
Have you ever come across that before?
Yeah, so that is something that I've heard from. I can't even begin to tell you how many women I've heard that from. I've heard from a lot of bisexual women who get nudged one way or the other, depending on where they are in the cycle. I've heard from women who thought that they were bisexual and then went on or off the birth control pill and then had that change where they were either completely straight or thought that they were completely lesbian. And did you manage to find a significant swing in one way or the other? It's really interesting because for most, the thing I've heard the most, but I've heard it all. But the thing I've heard most frequently is that they become a little more straight when they're off the pill.
So again, we're looking at the highest rates of bisexuality ever amongst women right now, but we're also probably looking at the highest uptake of hormonal birth control ever. So how many of the things that we're seeing at the moment, even from men's behavior, is being influenced by the pill?
I know. I mean, exactly. I mean, exactly. Yes. I mean, the idea, researchers have long suspected a role of sex hormones, like steroid sex hormones, in terms of sexual preference, right? And the story that you just told and the stories I've heard from women are very much consistent with sort of hormonal nudges in terms of preferences. And for some women, it might just nudge them, right over the borderline into bisexuality. And some women, it can nudge them right over the side from being bisexual to being fully heterosexual. And some women, it nudges in the other direction. And I actually had this idea because after I'd heard this story so many times, I started thinking about late in life lesbians. And, there's this tendency and culturally, we tend to think about this as just being something where women, sort of get tired of all the bullshit involved in being involved with men and that they're just looking for, companionship and then they start to they form these close and even sexual relationships with other women. But then I started thinking about menopause. And, the menopausal transition is this other period of hormonal disruption, right? Where you go from a naturally cycling state where you have this waxing and waning of hormones, including this big surge of estrogen that surrounds the periovulatory window that's associated with an increased preference for masculinity and maleness and just that sort of thing. And all of a sudden, over time, when our ovarian hormones begin to really rapidly decline, estrogen levels are, very, very low in postmenopausal women. And I started thinking about late in life lesbians and whether that might also be something that's emerging as a result of an actual hormonal nudge, where it's sort of nudging women out of the domain of heterosexuality or bisexuality into this sort of different mate preference state.
Well, think about it this way. Let's take grandmother hypothesis, right? Why it is that women go through menopause at all, so that they can contribute to the rearing of children whilst not contributing more children that need to be reared, with one of the explanations that you have for why lesbian women exist at all, which is kind of like a female on female pair bonding, allo-parenting agreement type scenario.
Yeah.
If you combine those two together, I mean, what better way for grandmother to ensure that her and some of the other women that she needs to look after her children and grandchildren are bounded together sufficiently well that while the guys are out hunting wildebeest or whatever it is that they do, the women get it on a little bit,
Yeah. No, it's such an interesting idea. It's so interesting. I find all of that so fascinating.
What's happening, people? If you enjoyed that, then press here for a selection of the best clips from the podcast over the last few weeks. And don't forget to subscribe. Peace.